I tipped him $200 in cash, shook his hand, and watched him drive away from the best day of my life. 3 days later, he called me back, not to share memories,
to warn me.
The photos he pulled up on that screen, shot on my wedding day at my venue, during the hour I was standing 20 yards away taking couple portraits, told a story I was never supposed to see. And when I looked at those images long enough, I realized my wife hadn't just hidden something. She had planned this. The question that still keeps me awake at night isn't what she did. It's how long everyone around me had known. I'm Orville, 34, male. I'm 6 feet even. I work in commercial real estate in Charlotte, North Carolina. I own a condo outright, bought it at 29, paid it down aggressively, no co-signer. And I am, by most reasonable definitions, a practical man. I don't make scenes. I don't overreact. I research decisions carefully, I plan, and I follow through. I say all of that not to sound impressive, but because what happened to me is the kind of thing people immediately assume they would have seen coming. They wouldn't have. I didn't. And I do this for a living. My wife and I dated for 2 years before I proposed. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She was sharp, genuinely funny in that dry way that earns it, and she had this quality I can only describe as measured. She didn't overshare. She didn't perform. She seemed like a person who knew what she wanted and didn't make a production out of it. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm. She split dinners evenly for the first few months. She never asked me what I made. I noticed those things because I dated women who did the opposite, and the contrast felt like relief. Her mother was another story. Loud, opinionated, and constitutionally incapable of staying in her lane. She had a way of phrasing every opinion as a form of generosity. I'm just trying to help, while completely overriding whatever you'd already decided. I wrote her off as a personality type. I told myself I wasn't marrying the mother. I told myself that a lot. The wedding was a Saturday in late September. We rented a venue outside Charlotte, an old converted farmhouse with grounds, string lights, the whole atmosphere. 120 guests. Open bar. A live jazz quartet during the cocktail hour. 11 months of planning, most of which my wife ran because she had strong opinions about every detail, and I mainly cared that the food was good and the bar was open. I paid for the majority of it. She had contributed some. Her parents contributed a smaller amount than they'd implied they would, and I covered the rest with a personal loan against my equity. Looking back, I clocked that the financial distribution was uneven. At the time, I told myself it was a gift to her.
To us.
I believed that. The day itself was everything it was supposed to be. The weather held, crisp fall air, no clouds. The ceremony ran clean. My best friend gave a speech that had the room going from laughing to quietly wiping their eyes. I danced with my mother. My wife danced with her father. Her dress was stunning. The photographer circled all of it like a professional ghost, invisible and everywhere at once. At the end of the night, I found him near the parking area, breaking down equipment. I handed him an envelope with a $200 tip on top of his contracted rate, shook his hand, and told him it had been a pleasure. He thanked me warmly. He drove away. 3 days later, he called me. "Hey," he said, and I could tell immediately from the shape of the word that this wasn't a normal follow-up call. I don't even know how to start this. I want you to know I went back and forth about calling for 2 days before I did it. I was at my desk. I leaned back. Okay, what's going on? I found something in the raw files while I was doing my initial pass. My second shooter was covering the cocktail hour. I was with you and your wife doing the couple portraits down by the pond. He was doing ambient coverage near the East Garden wing. He was just shooting atmosphere. Guests, the grounds, candid stuff. He paused. He caught something he didn't realize was significant, and honestly neither did I until I looked at the sequence more carefully. I had a strange feeling, not panic, not dread, more like the specific sensation of a door opening into a room you didn't know was there. "Can you come to the studio?" he asked. "I don't want to send anything digitally. I think this is a conversation in person." I drove there the next morning. He had 2 large monitors set up. He looked like he hadn't slept well. He offered me coffee, and I took it just to have something to hold. He pulled up a folder marked with the date of my wedding and opened a subfolder labeled East Garden. Ambient. "These are time-stamped," he said. "Cocktail hour, approximately 47 minutes in." He clicked the first image. Wide angle. The East Garden at golden hour. Hedgerows in the background. The old stone wall. Soft evening light filtering through the trees. In the background, not centered, not prominent, just there, half obscured by a hedgerow. 2 figures.
He zoomed in.
My wife, in her wedding dress, standing very close to a man I recognized without any effort at all. Her ex. The man she dated for 4 years before we met. The man she'd told me, explicitly, she hadn't spoken to in over a year. His hand was on her face. Her hand was flat against his chest. This was not 2 old friends saying hello. This was not ambiguous. "There are 11 photos in this sequence," the photographer said. The timestamps spanned just over 19 minutes. My shooter was doing wide coverage and didn't notice who they were. her. He was just shooting the garden. He looked at me steadily. I'm sorry. I genuinely am. But I couldn't sit on this. I looked at every single one of those 11 photographs. I did not rush. I looked at them the way you look at something you're going to need to remember accurately. Then I thanked him. I asked him to hold the full gallery delivery, not to send anything, not to call anything until he heard from me directly. He agreed without me having to explain why. I drove home, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for a while before going upstairs. I want to be precise about what happens in the immediate aftermath of something like this, because it's not what movies suggest. There is no explosion of emotion. There is instead a profound and disorienting stillness, like the moment after a car accident where your body hasn't caught up to what just happened. I sat in that garage, and I did not cry or yell or hit anything. I thought. I ran through 2 years of stored moments and held each one up to a different light. The vague phone flips when a certain notification appeared. The weekend trip to see a college friend she'd been strangely tight-lipped about. The way she sometimes left the room to take a call. Each of these things I had filed under trust. Under. I'm not that person who monitors my partner. Under. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. And every single one of those filed memories was now looking back at me differently. I went upstairs. I did not confront her that night. Instead, I opened her archived messages. She was logged into her tablet, which was connected to the same account, something she'd set up herself months ago and apparently forgotten about. The recent messages had been deleted, but archive threads from 8 months prior had not been cleared. 8 months ago, we were deep in the engagement. We had sent out save the dates. I had booked the venue. In that archive thread, she wrote, I love you. I need more time. Just trust me. He responded, how much longer? This isn't fair to either of us. She wrote, not yet. When things settle down, just trust me. Not yet. I photographed every screen with my personal phone. I backed up those photos to a cloud account she had no access to. Then I went to sleep. Or I lay there in the dark next to her and waited for morning. The next day, when she left for work, I called my best friend. He picked up on the second ring. I told him everything, the photographer, the images, the texts. There was a silence on his end. And then he said, bro, her ex was at the wedding. I thought you knew. I did not know. He was at the reception, he said. I thought she'd told you. He was listed. I saw him at the bar during cocktail hour. I assumed you two were fine with it because nobody made anything of it. I asked him to think back. Did it seem like they'd spent any significant time together? Another pause. I mean, I thought I saw her head toward the East Garden at some point during cocktail hour, but I figured she was taking a breather. You know how she gets about being on for long periods. I didn't think anything of it. 19 minutes. She'd used taking a breather as cover. I went back to the original guest list she drafted. He was on it, listed under a name I'd never connected to him, just a first name, listed in the column as college friend. She'd built that list. She'd controlled who I was introduced to at the venue that night. I had shaken hands with probably 60 people I didn't know and trusted her to tell me who they were. She had not told me who he was. She came home that evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water, doing nothing. Hey, she said, dropping her bag by the door. She looked at me. Why are you just sitting there? I'm thinking, I said. She made a sound that meant she wasn't particularly concerned and started going through the mail on the counter. And I watched her, and I thought about the East Garden. About 19 minutes. About not yet. Tell me about your ex, I said. She stopped. It was subtle, just a half second of arrested motion, and then she kept moving, sorting the mail. What do you mean? I mean, are you two still close? Do you talk? We don't really talk. She didn't turn around. You know that. He was at our wedding, I said. She turned around then. Her face ran through a series of micro-expressions, calculation, exposure, decision, and landed on offense. Are you seriously starting something 3 days after our wedding? Someone said something to you, didn't they? Because people cannot leave things alone. They always have to. The photographer found photos, I said. That stopped her completely. 11 of them, I said. East Garden. 47 minutes into cocktail hour. 19 minutes total. His hand was on your face. She stood there. I watched her choose her next move in real time. And what she said was, whatever he photographed is completely out of context. Not nothing happened. Not let me explain. Out of context. His hand was on your face, I said again. In your wedding dress. What context? She went into a different mode. The mode I later understood she'd been running on for 2 years. She told me I was paranoid. She told me I had always had trust issues, and this was exactly what she'd been afraid of, that I would find something to make into a problem, because I couldn't stand things going well. She cried. Real tears. Impressive volume. She said she felt ambushed in her own home. She said she'd given up so much to build this life with me, and this was how I was treating her. I sat through all of it. I nodded. I said very little, because I had already read the text, and the text had a timestamp, and the timestamp said 8 months ago. And 8 months ago, when she was writing not yet, just trust me, we had already sent save the date. dates. The next morning, her mother called. I had been expecting it. "I hear you've been upsetting my daughter," she said. No greeting. "Good morning," I said. "She is your wife. You made a commitment. Whatever insecurities you're working through in your own head, you do not take them out on her. That is not what marriage looks like." "I saw photographs of your daughter with her ex during our wedding reception," I said. She had told me she hadn't spoken to him in over a year. "Old friends run into each other at large events," she said, without hesitation. "That's not a crisis. That's life. My daughter married you. She chose you." The appropriate response is gratitude, not interrogation. Gratitude. "Did you know he was on the guest list?" I asked. A beat. Deliberate and just a half second too long. My daughter's guest list was her business to manage. "That's a yes," I said. "I am telling you right now," she said, and the warmth evaporated completely, "that if you blow this marriage up over nothing, I will make sure everyone who is at that wedding, everyone in your family, everyone in your social circle knows exactly what kind of unstable, paranoid man you are. I have known a lot of people for a long time in this city, and I will use every one of those connections. You want to make my daughter's life difficult? Try me." She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. I thought about the word gratitude. I thought about the word try. I photographed the call log. I wrote down the time, the date, and every specific word of the thread I could remember, and typed it into a document I immediately backed up. Then I called a family law attorney. I explained the full situation. My attorney was measured, thorough, and did not seem surprised by anything I told her. She walked me through the grounds for annulment under North Carolina law. The state recognizes fraud as a valid basis, specifically when one party entered the marriage through material misrepresentation of facts that the other party would have considered decisive. Concealing an ongoing romantic relationship from your fiancé while proceeding to marriage qualifies. Archived text messages from 8 months prior, sent while we were engaged and actively planning the wedding, combined with professional photographic evidence from a neutral third party, established a clear and documentable pattern. She also noted that since we had no joint assets, my condo was purchased prior to the relationship and remained solely in my name. We had no shared bank accounts, no joint debts. The annulment proceeding would be relatively uncontested from a property standpoint. "Document everything going forward," she said. "Don't tip her off. Don't leave the home. Behave normally. Keep paying your bills. Let me file." I did exactly that. The 2 weeks between retaining my attorney and the formal filing were surreal. My wife shifted strategies every few days. First, she was apologetic, not about anything specific, just radiating a general low-grade contrition, being warmer than usual, initiating conversations about our future, talking about apartments she'd seen online, as if we were about to go look at them together. Then she pivoted to wounded, distant, quiet, sighing in a way that was clearly meant to be heard. She was waiting for me to pursue her, to apologize for doubting her, to reset the dynamic back to where she needed it. I smiled. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner twice that week. I was the calmest I had been in years, because I had a plan, and people with plans don't need to perform. Then the entitled maneuvering escalated in 3 distinct stages, and I want to describe each one because it reveals exactly the kind of calculation that had been running under the surface the entire time. Stage 1. She went to my mother. Without telling me, she called my mother, with whom she had a cordial but never close relationship, and told her that I had become withdrawn and cold since the wedding and that she was frightened I was going to do something drastic because I had unresolved anger issues that she'd always quietly worried about. She was attempting to get my family to apply pressure before I could get there first. Frame the narrative. Make me the unstable one before the actual story came out. My mother called me that same afternoon. She said, "Your wife just called me, and I need to know what's going on." I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "All right, I'm not saying anything to anyone, but you call me every day until this is resolved." That was my mother. Economy of words. Maximum loyalty. Stage 2. Her mother appeared at my office. Unannounced. She walked into the building lobby and asked for me at the front desk. I came downstairs to find her standing near the reception area in a blazer, holding a sealed envelope. She handed it to me with the energy of someone delivering a peace treaty. Inside was a handwritten letter, 2 pages, that was equal parts apology and barely veiled threat. She wrote that she hoped I would consider the reputational damage to both families that a public annulment proceeding would cause. She wrote that she was aware things had gotten heated on the phone, and she regretted her tone. And then she wrote, in the final paragraph, that if I chose to proceed, she would have no choice but to share her perspective on the full arc of this relationship with those who know us both, and that she was praying for our marriage. Praying for our marriage. After knowing about the affair. After helping her daughter put the ex on the guest list. I photographed both pages of that letter, walked back to my desk, and emailed the images to my attorney within the hour. My attorney's response was a single sentence. "This is actually helpful. Thank you." Stage 3. My wife sat me down one evening and presented what she she called a proposal. If I agreed to halt the annulment proceedings and attend couples counseling, she would cut off all contact with her ex, in writing, notarized, permanent. She presented this with the energy of someone making a significant sacrifice. She looked at me like she was giving me something. "You're offering to stop seeing the man you were with in the garden on our wedding day," I said, "in exchange for me not pursuing a legal remedy for the fraud you committed in entering this marriage." She said, "I'm trying to save us." I said, "There's nothing to save. There wasn't anything real here to begin with." She stared at me, and for just a moment, something underneath the strategy showed through. Not remorse, recognition. The recognition that I had seen all the way through it, and there was nothing left to work with. The annulment was granted 7 weeks after filing. Her attorney contested the fraud grounds briefly, arguing the photographic evidence was inconclusive and the text messages were out of context, that word again, and that the two parties had simply experienced normal relationship friction that did not constitute material misrepresentation. The judge reviewed the documentation, the archived texts from 8 months prior, time-stamped against our engagement calendar, the sequence of 11 professional photographs, time-stamped and taken by a credentialed contractor, the pattern of misrepresentation established across both. The judge was not persuaded by the defense's framing. The annulment was granted on the grounds of fraud. My condo remained mine. No shared property existed to divide. She took what she'd brought into the marriage, and I was glad to see all of it leave my home. Here is the part one want to be precise about because it mattered more to me than the legal outcome. Approximately 1 week after the annulment was finalized, I contacted every mutual friend and family member who had attended the wedding. I did not write an emotional message. I did not editorialize. I sent a calm, factual communication. What had happened, what evidence had established it, what legal remedy I had pursued. I kept it to documented facts. My attorney had reviewed the language. The response was significant and immediate. Several people came forward to say they'd seen things at the reception they dismissed as nothing. 2 guests confirmed they'd seen my wife and her ex in what they described as a close conversation near the East Garden and had assumed it was innocent because, and this is the part that still gets me, they assumed if I was fine with it, there was nothing to worry about. One friend of hers, someone I barely knew, reached out privately and told me she'd known the relationship with her ex had never fully ended and had felt guilty about her silence. She apologized. I thanked her and moved on. Her mother, the woman who had called me at my office to tell me I should be grateful, the woman who had delivered a handwritten letter to my workplace and then claimed she was praying for my marriage, lost the things she'd been weaponizing, her social standing. The network of connections she'd promised to use against me turned out to be a network of people who'd also received my factual, documented account of events. And when the facts are clear and the documentation is solid, threatening to tell everyone doesn't land the way you expect. People found out what kind of woman she was instead. Several of her long-standing relationships went cold. She'd overestimated how much goodwill she had and dramatically underestimated how much people disliked being used as ammunition. Her ex, for what it's worth, ended things with my wife shortly after the annulment became public. Apparently, the situation was more complicated and visible than he'd anticipated, and when it stopped being a secret, it stopped being something he wanted. She had sabotaged her marriage and her reputation for someone who left when the cost became real. I heard through my best friend, who still crosses paths with some overlapping people, that she had tried twice to reach me through third parties. Once to apologize. Once for reasons he described as not entirely clear, but not good. I did not respond to either. My mother told me later, during one of our daily calls in the weeks after the annulment, that during the worst stretch of all of this, she had been lighting a candle every night. Not for the marriage. For me, that detail hit harder than almost anything else across the entire span of the story. I'm not interested in wrapping this up with a speech about red flags or trust or whatever universal lesson you're supposed to extract. You already know those things. What I'll say instead is this. The photographer didn't have to call me. His contract was complete. The job was done. The easier path was to deliver the gallery, take the final payment, and let me live in something that wasn't real. He chose the harder call. He drove to his studio and waited for me and sat with me while I looked at photos of my life coming apart, and he did it because he thought it was right. Not for money, not for credit, just because he thought it was right. There are still people like that. Not many, but enough. And look, if you've made it all the way through this story and you're still debating whether to subscribe, let me make it simple. This channel is the photographer who calls you 3 days after the wedding. We find what you weren't supposed to see, and we tell you about it anyway. The least you can do is hit subscribe. We'll be here when the next call comes. Okay, I need to know. When the mother showed up at his office with a handwritten letter and ended it with, "I'm praying for your marriage," after she knew about the affair the whole time, what would you have done with that letter? Because I would have laminated it and mailed it back to her after the annulment. Drop your reaction in the comments. And if you've ever had someone someone smiled to your face while quietly torching everything behind your back. Tell me how you handled it. This comment section is about to be very real. Subscribe if you believe people who help hide affairs should have to sit in the front row of the annulment hearing with a name tag that says accomplice.